Hello, everyone, and welcome to the next installment in our series, Dr. Gilbert Hosts. My name is Dr. Rebecca Gilbert, and I am the Chief Scientific Officer at American Parkinson Disease Association. Thank you so much for joining us today. I am very excited about today's guest, Dr. Erin Foster. Dr. Foster is Assistant Professor of Occupational Therapy at Washington University School of Medicine, and she has particular expertise in Parkinson's disease. So she'll be talking with us today about how to outsmart PD, and she'll also be taking your questions. So get ready for that. American Parkinson Disease Association, or APDA for short, is the largest grassroots network dedicated to fighting Parkinson's disease. And we work tirelessly to assist the approximately 1 million people with Parkinson's disease in the United States live life to the fullest. Please visit our website at apdaparkinson.org to explore all that we have to offer. You can contact APDA through our toll-free helpline, 1-800-223-2732, as well as via our social media outlets. And now I would like to formally introduce my guest. Dr. Erin Foster is Assistant Professor of Occupational Therapy, Neurology, and Psychiatry at Washington University School of Medicine in St. Louis, Missouri. Dr. Foster received her clinical doctorate in occupational therapy, her PhD in rehabilitation science, and she also completed postdoctoral training in clinical investigation and cognitive science at Washington University School of Medicine. She directs the Cognitive and Occupational Performance Laboratory, which generates knowledge to guide the development of more effective and comprehensive rehabilitation programs for people with neurologic disorders and cognitive dysfunction. Dr. Foster is also a longstanding member of APDA's Greater St. Louis Chapter Board of Directors. I am very excited to be talking with Dr. Foster today. Dr. Foster, welcome, and thank you so much for joining.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for the introduction, Dr. Gilbert. I'm happy to be here with you all.
Fantastic. So we're first going to start with a brief presentation from Dr. Foster about some tips and tricks. After that, we will be taking your questions. So Dr. Foster, thanks again for being here, and I'm looking forward to your presentation.
Great. So I am excited to share my tips and tricks that may make daily life a little bit easier for you. So first, I'll provide some thoughts on specific activities. Then I'll share some general principles with you. And then, as Dr. Gilbert said, we want to hear from you. And, in addition to providing your questions in the chat, please feel free to share in the chat any strategies that you found particularly helpful, because we can all learn from each other. So now we'll get into the presentation. So the first topic is using technology, and specifically your computer and your cell phone, which have become such big parts of our daily lives. So when you're thinking about using these devices, the first thing that you want to think about is your body position and making sure that your setup is ergonomically appropriate, that your surfaces and your screens are at the appropriate height, especially when it comes to computer use. So in general, you want your big joints like your elbows, your hips, and your knees to be at around 90 degrees. You want your limbs in neutral positions with your shoulders sort of relaxed at your side, your face your neck in a neutral position. A specific tip for people with Parkinson disease is related to using proximal stability. So like resting your elbow or your forearm or even your wrist on a surface to help reduce some limb tremor. There are numerous ergonomic computer accessories out there that are marketed for the general public. So there are lots of options there. And then there are also special types of equipment. So adaptive keyboards or specific software programs for people who may have reduced dexterity or tremor that can make, and these devices can make computer use easier for those people. So they can help to decrease typing or mousing mistakes, for example. So on the slide here, I have a picture of a product, the keyboard, and it's called Big Keys LX. So it's got, as you can see, it's got oversized keys to make typing easier for people with Parkinson's disease. A specific example of some software that you could buy is called Steady Mouse. So Steady Mouse markets itself as being able to detect and remove shaking. So this is related to the mouse before it reaches your cursor, and it also can block accidental clicks. I've also seen a product called Mouse Cage. So there are lots of different options out there. I am not an expert in all the specific options, but some OTs are, and you can get a professional consultation for that. There are also speech to text options, another software option, which can eliminate the need for typing or mousing altogether, although it's not always the best option for people with Parkinson's disease who may have issues with speech or voice. So there are a number of free built-in accessibility options for visual, hearing, and mobility support in your computers and your phones and your tablets. So I recommend trying these first before buying any expensive equipment or software. So on the slide, I've put the paths for how to get to those accessibility options. And then I've also shown a screenshot of an iPhone of where you can find those accessibility items. And so in talking to Lisa Carson, who's an OT friend and colleague of mine who works a lot with people with Parkinson's disease, she's found some specific settings to be very helpful for people with PD. So one of them is changing the cursor setting so that it tracks more slowly across the screen. You can also change the sensitivity of the mouse so it's not as sensitive to shaking. You can change settings to ignore double keystrokes on your keyboard or double touches on your iPhone. And there's also a feature that's automatically enabled on the iPhone called Shake to Undo. And so if you undo that function, that can be helpful. And so you're going to want to experiment with these different settings to see which one or which combination of settings works best for you to help you use your phone and your computer. And again, an OT consultation can really help you with that sort of experimentation and problem solving and matching you up with the appropriate device of all the options that are out there. So now we'll move on to writing, which in Parkinson's disease can be problematic because as people are writing, the writing becomes progressively smaller and irregular. The speed of writing can increase and it can lead to illegibility. And so these sorts of issues happen or become exaggerated or magnified with repetition. So one simple strategy for sort of trying to prevent or avoid these problems are just to take frequent breaks to break up that repetition. As with computer use, you also want to be aware of your body positioning when you're trying to write. You want to make sure that you're sitting in a comfortable chair at a desk that's at a good height for you, that maybe you're using some proximal stability to reduce that limb tremor. There are also many different types of writing utensils on the market, like weighted pens and pencils. You can buy weights to put on your pens and pencils, or writing utensils that have built-up grips. And so the best type of writing utensil for somebody with Parkinson's disease is really going to depend on that individual. So again, it might take some experimentation, potentially some professional consultation. So I have a picture there on the slide of a product called the SteadyWrite pen. And so this product markets itself as having this base that stabilizes your hand at a special angle to smooth out shaky or poor handwriting. And this works for some people, but it's not necessarily a magic bullet. So again, you've got to test these things out. There are also some things that you can do on your own, changing your environment or your behavior to potentially help with writing. So handwriting might benefit from what we call external cues. So those could be external visual cues like lined paper that can give you a visual target that you can write towards to make sure that you keep that size of writing. You can also use auditory cues like a metronome or rhythmic music that might help you keep that steady pace of writing. And then there are some other more internal or behavioral strategies that might help. So for some people, just focusing and continuing to think about making very big and large movements, bigger than you think you need to make, can help you maintain the appropriate amplitude of your movement. So that's kind of the principle that underlies the LSVT big treatment. Also, writing in block letters or print can be helpful for people instead of cursive. And then speaking out loud while you're writing, which can force you, again, to slow down. So it's a form of an external auditory cue. And so I have another picture on the slide here that just shows how someone's going from left to right, how someone's handwriting improves, moving from the very left picture where they're using sort of free form cursive, moving to using lined paper, and then writing, in block letters and graph paper. And the handwriting becomes increasingly more readable. There's also some evidence that just practicing handwriting can improve legibility in Parkinson's disease. So if writing is particularly difficult and something that's important to you, again, consider, seeking out an occupational therapist that's focused on handwriting. So now we'll move on to mealtime and specifically preparing meals. So one of the big things that you want to do is think about where things are located in your kitchen. And you might need to reorganize your kitchen, your refrigerator, your pantry, your cabinets for easier access. So you want to move items that you use a lot. You want to move things so that you can avoid bending and reaching, because those things can lead to falls in people with Parkinson's disease. And you also want to make sure that your most commonly used items are close at hand or the easiest to access. There are also behavioral strategies. For example, sliding things, especially heavy things, along the countertop instead of carrying it. So, you're filling up that big pot of water that you need to boil, and instead of carrying it from the sink to the stove, you might want to put a towel down on the countertop and plop that pot on the towel and then slide it across to your stove. You can also use carts to transport things around the kitchen. So from the countertop to the kitchen table, or from the refrigerator to the countertop. You can also sit while you're prepping stool, either at a kitchen table, or they also have tall kitchen stools that you can sit on while you're prepping food at countertops instead of standing. Some of the pictures on the slide are specific to cutting and safety while cutting. So there are adaptive cutting boards available that have non-slip bottoms and built-up sides and those little spiky things to stabilize your food. You can get safety gloves in case there's any shaking or misses. OTs love Dicem, so there's a picture on the slide of Dicem, which provides grip and no-slip surfaces for all sorts of things. And, then there are strategies to support the cognitive aspects of meal preparation. So, make sure that you're using your timers and alarms to help you time your meals, to remember to take food out of the oven, to remember to turn the oven off when you're done using it. If you're cooking a complex meal or recipe, plan ahead and write out a step-by-step plan and check it off as you go so that you can keep track of what you've done and where you are and what's next. Make sure that you gather everything that you need before you begin, so that A, that you make sure you have what you need, and B, it's all there and ready for you when you're ready to use it. And then also, so those strategies are more for planning, planning and executing a specific meal. But you can also meal prep ahead of time for the week if that might help you. And that kind of reduces sort of in the moment burden, having to decide what you're going to eat, and some time pressure. And it can promote healthier eating as well. So there's actually a huge online meal prep culture if you're looking for ideas for meal prep. So we'll move on to taking your medications. With Parkinson's disease, timing of medications can be critical for managing symptoms, maintaining function throughout the day, being able to sleep, etc. And people with Parkinson's disease oftentimes take many different medications at multiple different times throughout the day. So pill organizers can be extremely helpful. Because they're so helpful, there are so many different versions on the market. The choices can be overwhelming. So when you're looking for different options for pill organizers, you want to consider things like whether it's going to be used at home or when you travel, or whether you need something small and portable for just being out and about during the day. You want to think about, how long you need you need a pill organizer for? Do you just need one for daily use? Do you want one for the entire week? They even have monthly pill organizers. I've recommended doing it for using at least the weekly pill organizers so that you can be aware when you might need a refill. You also want to think of ease of use, like physical and cognitive use. So there's a picture on the bottom left of your slide that has these little, you push a tab to open the container, and it's supposed to be easier to open for people with arthritis or maybe some dexterity or strength issues. They even have pill organizers. You can see that one kind of in the middle there with built-in alarms and timers and reminders. So that's a pretty high-tech device that might take some training and some practice to get used to using, but it could also be very helpful. And then they even have automatic dispensers, which are a little more involved, but those really help you ensure that you only take what is due when it is due. So pill cutters is another sort of piece of equipment that can be helpful for people with Parkinson's disease. Sometimes you're prescribed a half dose, or you need your pills to be a little bit easier to swallow. Lots of different pill splitters on the market, but be sure that you talk to your doctor before splitting any pills or because some medications should not be taken this way for a number of reasons. So one example is like controlled or modified release tablets. Those should not be split. So you need to talk to your doctor if you're considering splitting or cutting pills. Again, thinking about cognition, if you find that it's challenging to remember to take your medications, you can use alarms, you can use timers. There are a number of apps on the market that are specific to medications. So I have a picture there called MediSafe, which not only reminds people to take their pills on time, but it can remind you about refills and track symptoms. It does all sorts of things. So it's a little complex. Many find that just using their mobile device setting alarms works just fine. And then I wanted to add that, so this isn't really a strategy for taking your meds, but it's just a way of sort of managing your medications over time. And you really want to make sure that you are consistent and you consistently communicate with your healthcare providers about your meds and how they're working for you. So make sure that all of your doctors know all of the different medications that you're taking. So you want to keep an updated list. Take that list with you to your doctor's appointments, review it periodically with all of your doctors. And then also, if you are feeling especially ambitious, it's helpful for your healthcare providers and for yourself to track your side effects and your symptoms, because that can help you understand, again, how your medications are working, and it can help your healthcare providers and also how to plan your day. We're going to talk about that in a minute, but how to plan your day around potential medication fluctuations if you have them. And it can also help your healthcare providers understand whether your meds might need to be adjusted. So the next activity that I'll talk about is getting out of bed. Getting out of bed, also moving around in bed, can be difficult for people with Parkinson's disease. And so, not surprisingly, there's lots of equipment for this. In my experience, my clients and people that I've talked to with Parkinson's disease like the type of bed rail that's pictured on the screen. I think it's called a bed cane. It can be used to grab and help turn yourself in bed, as well as provide some extra support to get into and out of bed. Also, if you're having trouble moving around in bed, you might want to think about switching to lighter weight, even satin or smoother bedding. Also, more form-fitting pajamas, things that you're not going to get all tangled up in when you're trying to move around in bed. Another way, so getting out of bed can be a complex activity. It's a complex multi-step activity. And so a general strategy that you want to use with these sort of complex multi-step activities is to break them down into their component steps and focus on doing each step subsequently. And so the other picture on the right side of your screen is an example of getting out of bed. I actually had a better example for people with Parkinson's disease, and it was real photos of a person with Parkinson's disease going through each step of getting out of bed. But it was from a long time ago, and I didn't have permission to use it here. So I found this picture on the internet. This example is for somebody with back pain, but it's pretty similar to what we advise for people with Parkinson's disease, except not necessarily with the pillow between your leg. So I'll walk through this with you. So you're laying on your back. The first thing that you want to do is bend your knees up. And then step 3 is rolling, using your knee to help you roll your knees to sort of provide that weight to help you roll over to the side. And we also recommend swinging your arm over to help you do that as well. And that's maybe where that bed cane can come in to help you turn over to your side. And then you move your legs to the edge of the bed and you kind of use your legs as a lever to help you sit up. And then you can use both of your arms to help push your body up like that. And then you are sitting in your position where you can use your hands in your nose over toes strategy to help you get up out of bed. And then I don't have this on the slide, but sometimes, people have to get up in the middle of the night to use the bathroom. And if you find that you need to do that, so there's getting out of bed and then there's getting to the restroom. So you're going to want to make sure that you have night lights available for safety, a mobility device, if you use one nearby so that you can get to the bathroom safely. And a bedside commode is also a perfectly appropriate option if you want to avoid walking around in the middle of the night. So there are a lot of specific solutions and equipment for specific activities or issues. Do a Google search and you'll find millions of solutions out there. But I wanted to end with just some general principles that potentially, if you get these down, you can, start to apply them across your daily activities. And so I was able to start most of them with P, except for the last one. But the first one is plan. Planning is so important. And this has to do with planning specific activities. So as I mentioned with the meal prep, try to think ahead, try to anticipate challenges, breaking down those complex activities into steps, writing those steps down and checking them off as you go. So planning, for a specific activity that you have coming up, as well as sort of longer term planning. So planning out your day, even your week, around times maybe when you're going to be feeling better or not so good. For example, if you have medication fluctuations, so you have on and off periods, you might want to plan, your really important must-do activities for times when your medication is going to be working at its best, or you're going to have the least fatigue. Sometimes people have a lot of physical fatigue, but they don't have mental fatigue. So you might want to plan a more sedentary but cognitively complex activity during those times of day. And you also want to make sure that you're balancing rest and activity throughout the day. And that also kind of leads into the next strategy, which is pacing yourself. So just give yourself plenty of time to do the things that you need and want to do. Everything these days, even for me, seems to take longer than you think it might take. So give yourself more time than you think you need to complete your activities. And having that extra time, it gives you the time that you need, and it also removes that feeling that we call of time pressure. So when people are feeling time pressure, like they have to get this thing done before this certain time, they're running out of time, it can really increase your stress and anxiety, which then can increase your motor problems and then make it take even longer. So it can be this negative cycle. So you want to give yourself plenty of time. Don't rush. Don't try to fit too many things into your day. Look at your to-do list. Look at what you have planned or expect to do in a day and cut it by like a third to a half. Again, make sure you're building in rest breaks and you're avoiding multitasking. A lot of this takes practice and repetition. to get it right. And that also leads into the problem solving. So again, you might need to experiment. You might need to use trial and error. You might need to try things out, reflect on how they went, see how you might change it and optimize it for the next time. And then, throughout all of these steps, use your resources. So I've mentioned multiple times, occupational therapists and other professionals can help you problem solve through all of these strategies and find the best piece of equipment or the best strategy that's going to work for you. APDA has lots of articles and information and webinars out there and resources to help you. Other people with Parkinson's disease, as I mentioned, they may have already figured something out that works for them, and it might work for you too. And then also Google. You can Google anything and find equipment. But again, the trick is being able to pick the one that works for you, which might take experimentation and might take some consultation from a professional. So I think with that, I'll end the formal part of my presentation. Thank you so much for listening. Now I want to hear from you. So we'll move to the question and answer session, and I'll invite Dr. Gilbert back to moderate.
Hi, thank you so much for that excellent presentation and so much information. We have questions coming in really fast and furious. So everyone's been really interested in what you had to say. So we're ready for our audience Q&A. We do have lots of questions already submitted. And if you have a question that you would like to ask Dr. Foster and you're participating right now, please feel free to enter your question right now in the live chat. And you can do so throughout our discussion. Now, in order to participate in our live chat, you need to be logged into either YouTube or Facebook. And I'd like everyone to know that we may even display your question along with the name and photo you're logged in with. So please be aware of that. All right, so our first question comes from Colleen. And this is a question that lots of people ask in some form. So here it goes. Who is the appropriate person to evaluate if I am okay to continue driving? My husband doesn't think I should drive. How should I get evaluated?
So there are driving specialists out there, many of whom are OTs. So I'll start with, I'm going to back it up for a minute. And the whole driving with Parkinson's disease thing, again, it really depends on the individual or the person. So having Parkinson's disease is not something that would automatically exclude you from driving. Rather, it depends on things like your cognition, your reaction time, visual perceptual abilities, and motor speed. So it needs to be determined on an individual basis in consultation with a professional. So it's great that you're asking about driving evaluations, especially if other people are concerned about your driving. So again, I think it's different in different cities, in different regions. I bet that your local chapter of the APDA could help refer you to a driving specialist in your area. And then what you would do is you would go and get a formal driving evaluation, and that person would make recommendations. And it's important also to know that the answer or the result of a driving evaluation isn't always either can drive or can't drive. There are ways to adapt for certain people for whom it's appropriate. There are ways to adapt your driving behavior, like maybe not driving at night anymore or avoiding highways, as well as different types of vehicles to accommodate changes in ability. And so for all of those reasons, you definitely want to get a professional driving evaluation and get those recommendations from a professional. But I'm glad that you asked that question, because driving is certainly a conversation that should be revisited regularly among people with Parkinson's disease.
Thank you very much for that. Our next question is from Raju. So this situation, having Parkinson's disease, is one that creeps up slowly on a person. So at what point would one consider an occupational therapy consultation?
Another great question. Thank you for that. It's true. It does creep up slowly, and things might change so slowly that you don't even sometimes notice that they're changing. But then all of a sudden you look at yourself, now compared to 2 or 3 years ago, and you realize that you're doing a lot less, and you've given up some of your activities that maybe used to be meaningful for you. And so we don't want that to happen. obviously as an occupational therapist, but I think the literature and the evidence is also showing that OT, just like neurology, just like PT, just like speech even, can be initiated at the very earliest stages of the disease, because it can be used to help address very subtle changes. It can be used to help you maintain put strategies into place so that you can maintain your current level of ability, so that you can continue working at your job. And it can also help you think about planning for the future as well. And so we recommend initiating OT early, and then continuing to revisit as function changes and as your needs change.
I think that's excellent advice. If we've learned one thing so far from your presentation, is that there are many tips and tricks you may not be aware of that can help your life. And so getting that information earlier is gonna be better. We have another question from Colleen, which is, let's say I have fallen on the floor. What are your suggestions for manipulations to get up from the floor?
So there are actually some specific ways for people to get up from the floor. Unfortunately, off the top of my head, I cannot remember the exact. So it's similar to the getting out of bed example, where it's a complex activity. You need to break it down. So the first thing is just to take a deep breath and reassess where you are. Figure out where you are. Look at your surroundings. Make sure that you're not injured. If you're falling a lot on the floor and finding that it's difficult to get up, you might want to use some sort of alert device that can notify people if you need help. But then after that, again, this idea of getting out of bed, it's a complex activity. It can be broken down into steps that you can use to help you get up. So I know sometimes people are able to get up and they're able to crawl to a table or a chair or a very, very steady surface, and then use that to help them get up. And I know that there are other strategies, but I just don't know them off the top of my head. So Google it, ask an occupational therapist or a physical therapist. And I am also now going to remember to look that up after this so I can help people.
No worries. That's the important thing is to get yourself to an occupational therapist and ask your questions. So we have a general question about getting dressed. Do you have any wardrobe suggestions that will allow me to continue to get dressed independently?
Yeah. So just as with, all of the different adaptive equipment that's for all of your daily activities, there are lots of dressing options as well. So in terms of wardrobe specifically, things that require fine motor coordination like buttoning, tying can be especially problematic. So you can replace buttons with snaps, which can be a little bit easier, or even Velcro or magnets in your clothing. You can have a tailor or somebody who's good with that install Velcro on the inside of your clothing so that Velcro or magnets so that you can fasten it and it still looks like it's buttoned. So it still looks like a button down shirt. There are also some clothing lines that already exist out there for this specific problem, or issue. So one brand is Buck and Buck, and another brand is Magna Ready. And so those brands of clothing are specifically designed to help people with fine motor coordination issues. You can also pre-button or pre-tie your clothing to make it easier to get into and out of. So for example, if you have a button-down shirt, you could button the entire shirt as far as it goes so that you can still slip it on over your head. And then you only have the problem of buttoning, the top few buttons, or having somebody help you button the top few buttons. And it also becomes a little less challenging because that's less repetition. And so you don't have as much of an opportunity for that bradykinesia to kick in and cause the problems. There are a number of dressing aids out there. Well, we'll skip that. So we'll stick with the wardrobe thing. They have elastic no tie shoes for shoelaces. You can also consider slip-ons. And then again, a number of dressing aids that are out there, like sock aids, button hooks. Those things take some practice to learn how to use. So they look very simple, but they're not always simple solutions. But if you're willing to put in the effort to sort of practice mastering the use of those pieces of equipment, they can also be very helpful. And again, if dressing independently is important to you, it may just be a matter of building more time into your schedule for yourself to do that in the morning, and think about making sure that your medications are working well so that you can get that done.
Great. Thank you very much for that. We have a great question from Reverie. She was advised to go to an outpatient facility to get occupational therapy or physical therapy, but it's much easier for her to get that occupational therapy in the house. What would be your, how to make a decision? Does it make sense to make the extra effort to go to a facility, or is home OT good enough?
I personally like home OT because that's where you live, and that's where you carry out most of your daily activities. And so I think it's a good idea for the therapist, even if you do go to a facility, to do some sort of home visit and some sort of home evaluation so they can look at your specific context and assess it for safety and help you figure out what you might need to reorganize, or what safety hazards you might need to remove. And that so you can also do in context practice and training of new skills. So I think the home is a great place for occupational therapy services. That being said, you can also get really good services in outpatient settings too. So it's up to you. I think it's a matter of personal preference, what you feel the most comfortable doing, and what you have access to.
That makes a lot of sense. So thank you for that great answer. So we have a question from Tom, which really broadens us to discuss about memory and cognitive issues. And I know this is something that occupational therapists can help with quite a bit. So Tom says, I have trouble following instructions step by step. Do you have any tips on how to slow myself down, to focus, to try to stay on task? And more generally, do you have tips on how to overcome cognitive challenges that may interfere in function?
Yeah. So this is actually one of my areas of research and expertise. I could give a whole talk or multiple talks on the cognitive issues and potential tips and strategies for dealing with them. This work is still in its infancy, but we've learned a lot. In terms of the idea of slowing yourself down, focusing on the step by step. It's true that many people, you've been doing things a certain way for many years, and you sort of approach your tasks automatically. And so it is a challenge, as your abilities start to change, to be able to stop yourself and slow yourself down and be more mindful of what you're doing and doing things differently than you used to. And so I think this idea of breaking down steps, making sure you go slow and doing them, in order, I think that taking some time again, it has to do with the planning. Before you start something, sit down and think of what the steps are and write them out and use that as like a checklist and check them off as you go. And that way you'll make sure that you don't skip anything and that you have a record of what you've done and what you need to do. So just sort of being more deliberate about specifying the steps, getting them down on paper where you can see them, and tackling one at a time can be very helpful for people. And so, and also for things that you do a lot, like for example, the getting out of bed example, I know people who have come up with their own acronyms or come up with their own shortened versions of those steps, for example, that it takes to get out of bed. They type it out, maybe laminate it, put it by their bedside. And so they have that to refer to. And the more and more you do it, then that becomes your new habit. And eventually you might not need those visual cues to help you break down complex activities.
Very good. Excellent. We have another question that comes up very frequently, which is, how do you have tips to help me get in and out of a car?
Yeah, so there are a few different pieces of equipment out there. There's one that I found that people really like. It's called the Handy Bar, and it's this. It's like a metal kind of curved thing that you can stick in the loop of the door frame. It's on the bottom of your car door, and you stick it in there. It's very sturdy, and then you can use it to help push yourself up out of the car. And then another sort of similar piece of equipment is I don't know what the name of it is, but it's like a strap that you can attach to the top, either your door frame or somehow to the top of the car, and you can use it to help pull yourself up out of the car. There's another one that's like a swivel. You can get a swivel seat and put it on the car seat, and so then it helps you. It makes it easier. Like if you're getting into and out of the car, you sit down on the swivel, and it makes it easier for you to either swivel your legs into the car or out. And so you can actually use that in combination with either the pull or the push. And then again, thinking about these complex activities and breaking them down, using some movement strategies, like again, turning sideways and backing up to the seat, and then sitting down, and then lifting your feet and moving them into the car is a safer strategy than trying to sort of scoot into the car sideways and lift one leg up, and then sit down sideways into the car.
Excellent. We have another question which specifically asks about zippers. So instead of purchasing clothing with adaptive equipment on them already, this question comes from someone who owns a jacket with a zipper, very hard to manipulate. Do you have any suggestions to help that person with their zipper?
Yeah, so there's so this is actually a simple piece of equipment that is pretty easy to use, and it's called a zipper pull. So it's just like a little thing that you basically just slide through the hole of the zipper, and if you Google zipper pull, you'll see it. I actually have an APDA zipper pull in my in my drawer. So yeah, you just slide it through the handle, and it just provides a larger surface for you to use to pull your zipper up and down. Some sort of a hook, I would assume, would work as well. And those things, then after you use them, you can remove them, put them in your pocket for the next time you need to zip or unzip your coat, so that you don't have this big thing hanging off your zipper.
Fantastic. I want to acknowledge at this point that many of our participants are putting in their own tips in our comment section, which are exceedingly helpful, and I hope everyone has access to them and are reading them. What I hope to do is compile these suggestions that we have saved and share them with our APDA network, and make it well known about all these tips that are coming in from our audience. So feel free to continue to enter those tips, because they're really going to be helpful to everyone, and we'll make sure they're publicized widely. So I think we'll ask one last question, because we really have gotten to the end of our time, which is very unfortunate, but it really rushes by. And this is a general question from Paul. And I think this might really speak to a lot of people who are listening, which is, I find living with Parkinson's disease sometimes exhausting. And a lot of what you're describing and how to break down the various tasks, it's a lot. It can be very overwhelming. How do you stay motivated to do the steps that you've indicated, to write everything down, to take everything step by step? How do you stay motivated to fight this disease?
Yeah. I'm hoping that your fellow audience members are typing their suggestions for how to stay motivated and fight this disease in the chat as well. But my hope is that you try something. You don't have, again, you're right, it can be overwhelming. There are so many different things out there. You try something, and you work at it, and if it works and it helps make one little aspect of your life a little bit easier, I hope that in and of itself motivates you to try more. And so you don't have to do everything all at once, but I think just picking one thing and starting with it, and seeing the success that it brings may then again motivate you to keep going and to try new things and continue to work, to put in the effort to make your life easier.
That's great. Thank you so much. And thank you so much to all our participants who have contributed questions and ideas and thoughts. Thank you so much, Dr. Foster, for your presentation, for answering all those questions, for all that information. So if you know somebody who missed today's program, if you joined late, if you'd like to watch again, this recording will be available later today on our YouTube channel. And don't forget to subscribe to APDA's YouTube channel to watch new videos and live broadcasts. For additional information and resources, please visit our website at apdaparkinson.org. I want to now alert everyone to our next episode of Dr. Gilbert Hosts, which will be held on Wednesday, November 10th at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And I will be hosting Dr. Ruth Walker for a Q&A just in time for Veterans Day on the veteran community and Parkinson's disease. Dr. Walker is a movement disorder physician at the VA in the Bronx, New York, and she will discuss clinical care for Parkinson's disease at the VA and scientific research into military exposure and Parkinson's disease. And you'll also be hearing from a veteran who's living with Parkinson's disease. You can register for this session as well as many other virtual programs using our virtual calendar on our website. So go to apdaparkinson.org/events, scroll to November 10th, and register for our next Dr. Gilbert Hosts event. If you enjoyed this program and you would like to donate to APDA so we can do more in delivering more programs and services, please feel free to go to our website, apdaparkinson.org/donate, where you can contribute to our cause. I want to thank again everyone for joining, and we hope to see you soon on the next APDA program. Have a great afternoon.